Time to listen to me grind. Take down the film watchers and nerds all at once.
Yo. Welcome back. We continue our dive into the 2021 rookie class, whatever year this is, rookie class. This video we're going to be talking about Michael Carter, a running back who I thought I'd already broken down, and then I checked my list of prospects that I've been given to go work through next, kind of a thing, because we're skipping around. We don't just want to go top to bottom. We don't want to talk about all the prospects everyone else is talking about, so I've just been taking suggestions, and I realized, no, I haven't, actually. I must have broken them down on someone's podcast or something. I think I talked about them on every podcast, actually. Roto Underworld, Travis Main, RotoViz, probably the Dynasty Crossroads, but not here, so we're doing that now. So Michael Carter, who is he? He's a tiny guy. Tiny. I have no idea. I don't have combine metrics. I continue to refuse to respect pro days enough to even really be vaguely aware of them. But I get the impression he's a tiny guy. Essentially, he's a running back coming from the college system in, where was it? North Carolina? Yeah, North Carolina, who split the workload. And that's always a nerve-wracking term or nerve-wracking situation for a fantasy player, because mostly we want dominant running backs. Unfortunately, we have like 3 of those. So just get over it, I guess. And I don't just mean prospects. I mean the NFL these days. But we had seen prospects come from college in more of a split situation and be dominant. Now, interestingly enough, the player that I think is going to be comped to Michael Carter, specifically going to be comped to, or at least he's going to come up in his evaluation a lot, is Giovanni Bernard, because he's played in a split backfield a lot with Jeremy Hill and others, and was good again when finally given an opportunity this year in 2020, because he's a really good player. I've got like a strong fantasy eggplant for Giovanni Bernard. Like, I love that player, and I enjoy watching him. Not that I ever watch football, ever, because I'm a nerd, obviously. Fake nerd. Don't tell him, but fake. Where was I? But the thing is, Gio didn't do that in college. Gio had an ultra-dominant, very productive, high-receiving skill set in college from North Carolina, and that's why he's going to come up a lot. Yeah, college roles don't always translate to the NFL, which is why I'm always hesitant to suggest that a player who plays one type of position, the position one type of way in college, is going to do it in the NFL. Even at wide receiver, slot, X, whatever, there's variance there, and since we don't track it well with that ADOT, at least publicly tracked ADOT, I don't know we can lead into that. We do know specifically about running backs that receiving usage is highly correlated to receiving usage that's fantasy relevant in the NFL. Obviously, these guys are professional athletes, even at this stage, so they can catch a ball. Like, I can catch a ball, and look at me, you know? Every nerd can catch a ball. Like, take him outside, throw a ball at him, it'll hit him in the face a couple times, sure, but eventually he'll catch the ball just out of a sense of self-preservation, if nothing else. And so, yeah, professional athletes can catch balls, but so we make up a story of why receiving correlation actually corresponds to receiving usage in the NFL to a very high degree, in that very few running backs who aren't used significantly in the receiving game ever develop that trait, practice, habit. I want to say skill, but that's not it, because I just said it's not the skill thing. Anyway, in the NFL. Now, a great example of this is how every year of Adrian Peterson's year, clearly one of the most productive, best running backs, maybe not other things, but running backs in the NFL ever, was always going to increase his receiving game. I don't know if you remember that, but I remember being promised that every year, and it never happening. Now, obviously, Adrian Peterson catch a ball much better than I can catch a ball. So why didn't he develop that as a large part of his game? Probably for a bunch of reasons. Probably because we underrate how difficult it is to catch a ball, even as a dump-off pass, which is a throwaway phrase to mean, anyone can do it. Henry can catch 50 dump-offs, sure. And by the way, the just casual use of the word dump without giggling is just, come on, man. That's a funny word. But anyway, it doesn't happen. I mean, we've got Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon did it. LaDainian Tomlinson did it. But then again, he did a lot of stuff that most players don't do. So, let's not say everyone can be LaDainian Tomlinson. And that's really about it. That didn't hit a certain significant, some sort of receiving usage in college and then developed in the NFL. Most have it in college. Now, the story, I've talked about this with everyone. But Zach Reed and I, our thoughts on this mesh better than most of the people I've talked about it in. It's that if a team typically doesn't draft to develop. Now, I think that's a useful thought in a lot of ways. But in this particular case, if they draft a running back, it's not to see if they can experiment to make him a receiver as well. It's because they've seen him do things in college that they like, and then they want them to do those things for them in the NFL. Like, that's the static average. And again, there's a fallacy of the average, but that's the average logic. So if you're not doing it a lot in college, they're not going to be like, hey, let's just try it. Why not? We're not doing anything else this week. Let's just experiment with this guy's skill set, right? Now, it does happen. Again, Melvin Gordon did it, but default should be if they don't do it a lot in college, they're not going to do it a lot in the NFL. And that's with the caveat that roles we don't know how well roles, any position really carry over well to the NFL at all, but still. So why am I mentioning all of that? Because, Michael Carter's a little guy, so he's got to have a receiving skill set, and we have a lack of 3-down running backs in this class, and Michael Carter kind of breaks down as a guy with a 3-down skill set in more of a split situation than we typically like. Now, the typical default, and this is true, is you want a dominant running back to see how good they are and see that they can gain that value from their team, that position on their team, and therefore, hopefully, if the NFL gives them draft capital, that's what they're expecting them to do more of when they go to the NFL. So you want them to see them do that. You don't want to have to wait till Mark Ingram breaks away from the committee to finally be more of what his true potential could have been, because he's obviously a very skilled running back. Or the Carolina situation with Jonathan Stewart and I didn't forget a name. You forgot a name. Anyway. And wait till they separate before they can reach their full potential and so on and so forth. But, this running back class is fairly thin. So we're taking what we can get. And it does happen. It happens more often that a running back in a more split situation becomes valuable for us in fantasy than a running back who has no receiving stats, that was the word I was looking for, in college suddenly develops a high level of receiving stats in the NFL. This word stats should probably come more easily to mind now I think about it. But anyway, so let's take a look at Michael Carter, and I'm excited about this, I think I found a way to make a graph for running backs. Like I'm always putting up graphs for wide receivers. I think I got an interesting graph for you to put Michael Carter into perspective of past productive players, so let's do that as well. Now, finally get off this damn screen. So we're going to start off looking at year-to-year production. Now, because my database is hard to read, especially on the little screen that I give you for this section of the YouTubes, what I've done is highlighted the different years. So 2011, 2012, I've alternated the formatting so you can see when one year starts and one year ends. And this is North Carolina going all the way back to 2011. So we can see Giovanni Bernard, essentially. Since he's going to be a regular comparison and is this more split committee running back that we imagine Michael Carter was in college, right? So, over here, let's just pull up their market share receiving yards. And so the first thing you'll note is Giovanni Bernard had 71% of the rushing yards in his first season, by the way, at age 19. He only played 2, but still, for North Carolina. That's a very high level of usage or rushing production from a guy that later would be seen as a small guy minimum running back. Now, Gio, despite being very, very talented at the running back position, and I maintain a better rusher than Jeremy Hill ever was, still, not disrespect to Jeremy Hill, I just really love Giovanni Bernard. He's kind of one of the poster childs of if you're too small, even with draft capital and a good profile, then you're not going to become a dominant running back. And I think that's slightly a lie. I think that's also how lots of bad or mediocre NFL coaches see it And that's what led to his usage, much more than what he was capable of. And I know he struggled with injuries, but we'll have this argument another time, because this isn't a Giovanni Bernard argument video. But yeah, still, he had 71% of the rushing yards in his first year at age 19. So that's the first thing to know, that North Carolina has produced that, and as one of the running backs have come from that team to be productive in the NFL, it's worth noting. And so when we look through the years, Gio had 52% of the rushing yards in his second year, so significantly less. But notice that the running back 3 actually increased his overall rushing yards. Ramon Morris, not that he ever became anything, or AJ Blue for that matter, but the running back 2 remained stable, and the rushing yards seemed to drift towards running back 3. So it was more of a committee approach, but very much with Giovanni Bernard having a heavy usage. Now, running backs in the top 12 tend to average in their best, or in their average over their career, around 60% dominators, or 60% total dominators in terms of total rushing yards and receiving yards for the running back position. And so that's a good number to kind of have in your head. This is slightly below the average for top 12 running backs, but he also hit a 70%. So that gives you a baseline of understanding from this situation over the years. The most productive running back I can think of that came from this team did those things. So let's compare that to what happened after. Now, there's a period of time after Gio where you just see no one hitting even that 40%. You've got a 28% from TJ Logan, 15% from AJ Blue. You see they are splitting it, but they're still leaning on one back more than the others, right? That's the other thing I'd noticed about North Carolina here. TJ Logan and Ramon Morris, again, 33 to 16% split between the rushing yards, which there's a high correlation to usage and opportunity and overall market share, especially at the running back position, much as it works in the NFL. But still, you have to be good to earn that, is the typical logic we should apply to running backs. If you're earning the running back 1 position and the largest share, then you are the guy in that system. So moving on, you've got Elijah Hood and TJ Logan in 2016. Now, Elijah Hood actually gets a more significant share than we've seen anyone else do before, and so does TJ Logan. 33% is actually what running back 1 was doing on this team for the years between Giovanni Bernard and 2016, and so these guys occupied more of a committee, but obviously these guys have also not gone on to do very much in the NFL or anything at all, so they're not names that might stick in your heads or that you have reference for, but it's interesting to see the way opportunities flowed through this team, because we're interested in what happens when Michael Carter gets on the team. So his very first year at age 18, he had 33% of the rushing yards. That's the next guy to have 33%, apart from that 1 year before. So this might be a slightly larger team trend. And I'm interested in the fact that Jordan Brown, who was on the team the year before, got 37%. So he's slightly differentiated towards, because he's been on the team perhaps already a year. And I do think there's a team bias towards who's been on the team, and also just an experience bias. You know more of the offense, you have developed more in terms of your physicality. I think that's true at running back as well. But Michael Carter doesn't storm onto the field, which is what we prefer, right? You just prefer a player who walks on and dominates at any position, really. But he does come on and have a significantly high share of the yards as a running back 2 in terms of overall production for North Carolina, more so than most running backs have done since Giovanni Bernard. We've only really seen 33% crested twice, and it was in the same year by those 2 players we just mentioned. So, that's definitely good for an 18-year-old recruited onto North Carolina, even if Jordan Brown got the majority of the yards. And again, we should compare those 2 players if we really wanted to break down what happened there across other stats, but we're desperately trying to get our YouTube videos down under 3 hours, okay? So, moving on. Michael Carter in his second year becomes the running back 1 with Antonio Williams, interesting name, just below him with 24%. Again, he's cresting fairly high usages compared to past running backs since Giovanni Bernard, but Antonio Williams isn't much. We're not talking about another Giovanni Bernard, and even though this looks pretty good, 29% in his second season at age 19, only playing 9 games, which is an interesting thing to note in 2018, but we'd have to dig into that season more to see if he's didn't separate himself more from Antonio Williams because of those 9 games, because of an injury. That's the next stage of learning about players, right? We're just looking at the production in these videos, much more so than trying to learn the entire backstory. Again, trying to keep these videos down under 3 hours. But yeah, that's the stuff we'll need to know before we ever get near drafting them. Javonte Williams, who's going to be, I think, more preferenced. People are going to like him more in our rookie drafts this year. He's on the team that year. Note, he gets 10% of the rushing yards and will eventually overtake Michael Carter as the quote-unquote running back 1, and I think be more preferred, especially compared to some of the analysis and ranks I've seen so far. So it's interesting to know that he stepped onto the team in that second year of Michael Carter's career, and then we'll have to learn more about why he only played 9 games. Third year, Michael Carter plays a full season with 13 games, 42%. Again, finally, showing signs that he is cresting a larger opportunity share than most players on this team since Giovanni Bernard. Some have hit 40%, 44% we saw at one point. But still, especially with this heavy committee coming on, with Javonte Williams finally coming on in his second year at age 19, he's getting 39%. Remember, we've seen relatively few running backs crest the 30% mark since Giovanni Bernard, since the last NFL caliber running back that's been on this team. So both of them are actually hitting interesting marks here. But again, we saw 2 other no-name running backs do that together on the same team, so it's not in and of itself overall positive. But they are doing something slightly different than the majority of years since Giovanni Bernard, and I think that's interesting. The final year, which is obviously 2020, so everything goes with a heavy let's read about this season, what really happened. Played 11 games, got 47% of the yards. He actually got a larger share of the rushing yards of Javonte Williams, even though he's the one that's more hyped and higher ranked, I think because of the team small guy versus team big guy thing. I don't think I've done a YouTube video on Williams now I think about it. I have ranked him, but still. Anyway, so Javonte Williams is seen as, let's go to points here. Yeah, that's why. Javonte Williams is scoring more points because of a heavy touchdown role, but Michael Carter is actually the bigger rushing producer of the 2, both of them playing 11 games in 2020, so the team didn't skip many games, interestingly enough, in 2020 compared to some other teams, and that's the usage. That 47% is the most significant rushing yards percentage of any running back in North Carolina, really, from memory, and we just went through the list, since Giovanni Bernard, who, was hitting 50 and 70s. So he doesn't compare directly, but he is in more of a committee with Javonte Williams, who's also hitting significantly high share of the offense compared to past players since 2013. So that's just me running through the numbers and kind of where Michael Carter and Javonte Williams fit into them. Alright, so the other thing I want to do in this video is answer a question I end up answering a lot. So let's go to Damn it. What are the best metrics, Pete? That's a question I get a lot, and the thing is, the answer is always, even when you ask a fake nerd like me, for what? What's the best metric for what? Look at all of them. It's really the answer, but in this context, something I'm constantly pointing out, and I've done videos on, the best stat for each position, check out various YouTube playlists for that, or articles and everything else, but a way you can decide for yourself the first thing you want to look at. I thought I'd show you an interesting way I think you can prune through the data to find the first things you might be interested in looking at. And so if you go to the Formulas and Results tab, which is in the database, and looks like this, what you'll see is, and I haven't tested everything in every which way, but I've tested many things in many which ways, and I've tried to include as many of those results as I can in the Formula and Results tabs. And not to belabor the point, because I got a whole video breaking down this tab as well, but you can see the samples of the players I tested. You can see how many players were in that sample size. You can also see the formulas, so you can see how I calculate things, or anyone calculates things. If you're interested in how to calculate college dominator, for example, it's in there. But what I've gone and done is sorted it to running back stats. And then if you look over, you can see the R squared. If you're fancy and nerdy and you know what that means, great. If not, don't worry about it. This is how, this is the most common test for whether a number is good. Okay? For telling you if a player's going to be successful in the NFL. Let's just leave it there for now. That's so bad. That's a bad description, but I'm a fake nerd, so I can do that kind of thing. So essentially, the higher the number, the better it is at explaining how likely, that's a bad word too, a player is going to be good in the NFL. That's a bad word too, but let's just move past it. Let's move past it. And what I've done is sort from high to low, so the most predictive, that's a bad word, stats to the least predictive stats for the running back positions of the tests that I've run and uploaded into this formula results tab. And let's shrink this a little bit more so we can actually see more of it. Alright, so essentially, these are the best stats. Kind of. And so you see my post-draft model is scoring the highest, which it should, because it's trying to include everything that has any signal to predict. But we don't have draft capital yet, so we don't have to worry about that at all. But what we can do is go past draft, go past pre-draft model, because who really gives a crap about models, and look for stats, right? So, average yards per team attempt. That's the first actual stat with the result, in that it has the highest single score of any of the stats. So the average yards per team attempt. We want to know that one. We also know, scoring the exactly the same, points per game over conference running back one average. That's an actual stat that's at the top of the list here. So also the best stat. And the next one coming up is, the average of their adjusted yards per team attempt. So here we've got three stats scoring relatively highly in the formulas and results tab. So if you wanted to find the best stats, because you've looked over stuff, you've followed the other processes, you've got your own, you've watched all the film, whatever it is, and now you're looking for the best stat, this is one way to try and find stats that have a good correlation to being good in the NFL. Not really, but kind of, and that's what I've got for you, okay? So let's look at those three stats for Michael Carter. That's what I'm saying. All right. That's it. All right. Running back tab. All right. So, yeah, let's sort by North Carolina here. All right. So you got Michael Carter at the top because he's the most recent prospect. You've got Giovanni Bernard in the middle here. He was drafted somewhere in 2013, obviously in the second round. And what I've done is just hidden all the other columns. And you can see that normally at this point in the video I've been running through, his rough stats, just to give you an idea of how productive he was. 4,000 yards overall with 596 touches, and that breaks down to what is it? Like a 6.8 yards per touch, which isn't a predictive or sticky metric particularly, but I find it fairly descriptive of how good they were at producing with the touches that were available, or they were able to earn on the team. And you notice that compares fairly well to Giovanni Bernard. Again, you can see up the top, because I run my own independent calculations when I get into the database, just to give myself a baseline. So this top line, you can't see because of my big fat head, but it is actually the R-squared 2 PPR points across the whole database, which is a terrible sample because it's got rookies and players that didn't get stats and stuff in it, but I want just a rough reference. And the one below that, this second line here, is the average for running backs that have at least one top 12 season, and so that tells you that running backs with one top 12 season or more have about 6.1 yards per touch, and that just gives me an easy reference to see that 6.8 is good, and 6.0 is okay, and 6.5 is good, and 4.7 is bad, because top 12 running backs get 6, okay? It's just a quick reference for me, and that's why I have those two lines running across the top. And Michael Carter actually had 20 receptions or more, according to the Zach Reed rule, every year. He's a receiving guy, but notice that Giovanni Bernard, despite being that heavy 71% rusher we just saw, he got 4 receptions a game compared to Michael Carter's 1.9 receptions a game. So, worth knowing, even though he had 3 years crossing the Zach Reed rule, Giovanni Bernard was a heavier part of that rushing offense, and as we just saw with his rushing production overall, he was a pretty decent sized chunk of that rushing game, to the point that he was producing a larger percentage of the yards for the team than Javonte Williams, who's going to be described as the thunder to Michael Carter's lightning, which is inaccurate. And so that's an advantage we have, because we actually went and looked. Small guy, receiving guy, and he definitely has a receiving skill set, just looking at those numbers. He was also a really productive runner compared to Javonte Williams on the same team. Worth knowing, don't you think? I think it's worth knowing. Anyway, so the rest of the tabs I just hid, so you can see the 3 tabs that we just found in the formula results tab. Remember this one right here, adjusted yards per team attempt average? the average year. This was the most predictive, the one at the top of the list, followed closely by the average of the adjusted yards per attempt, and then yards per team pass attempt, and this is the stat that was points per game over conference running back one. Again, it's stuff we found over here in, the formulas and results tab. And so those are the stats we can look at. So how does Michael Carter stack up compared to his team, and also compared to this average I've got running down the top? Pretty good is the answer. He comes up as like a top 10 running back in my pre-draft model, I think. He was productive despite having that split situation. And as we saw running through the team, it's not like he distanced himself like we would really want anyone to, like Gio did. But it was better than most running backs who stepped onto that team since Gio, and he's in a much heavier committee than anyone was between Gio and 2020. And Javonte Williams and Michael Carter both profile as larger shares of the offense than you would suspect for the running back one or running back two if they're not Giovanni Bernard. So I think both of them are subpar prospects compared to both, but they're also in a rougher situation because both seem to have been worthy or earning or creating more of an opportunity for themselves than most running backs have been able to do on that team at the same time. Now, I don't like team adjustments, especially team adjustments for other teammates, because specifically at wide receiver, I really don't think it works that way a lot. But with running back, it's a little harder to judge it so harshly because, frankly, running back works different. Opportunity is much more a coaching and a team decision than it is at wide receiver, where there's little choice who is open and who is good at catching the ball. A coach can't run onto the field and be like, no, bat that ball down, don't throw it to that player. That's not the player I wanted to catch the ball. Whereas he can say, you sit down, you go on the field. That really limits the guy on the bench's opportunity to rush the ball. And so there is more of control of who can get opportunity at the running back position compared to wide receivers, or really even tight ends. So, that in mind, judging him in the situation he was playing in with another running back who was either desired to or able to earn a significant share of the offense, more than most on this team in recent history, or distant history for that matter, I think Michael Carter did pretty well. He's 8.4 points over running back one average. Remember, he's in a committee in 8 points over the average, which is actually about the same. I don't know why I'm pointing over here, because it actually looks like it's over there to you, but there's no screen over here to me. That's weird. I just remembered that. Anyway, 8 points over the average, which is the average over the points per game average for running backs who have top 12 seasons. Not that he's going to be a top 12 running back, but he's comparing well to him on this stat that we just saw. Is a fairly good one to look at for running backs. Now, he's under the average for running backs in adjusted yards per team pass attempt over conference average, but again, the conference is affected by the team situation significantly. It's one of the things we can't get to because we're still busy discussing whether one number being higher than another means one number is higher than another, so I can't actually get to the conversation on how that interplay between team and conference matters. But essentially, because he's in more of a committee with perhaps another very talented player on the team, you should expect him to be lower to expected than the conference, and that's kind of what's playing out here. And you can see Javonte Williams isn't. He's actually right on the average that you expect for top 12 running backs, but we'll break down Javonte Williams down differently in another way. But suffice to say, Michael Carter doesn't test well in one of three different stats we've already gone and seen. A fairly good way of breaking down a player's profile, but he looks very good in terms of points per game. Javonte Williams looks better in both. The final one here is adjusted yards per team pass attempt, which is actually the one I trust most, and you see that both are significantly under the average, which is 1.8 for top 12 running backs, but both are reasonably close to that average. And remembering the fallacy of the average, I would rope them into they were good in their situation according to this stat, which tests very well for proving which running back is going to be good in the NFL. And so you've got Javonte Williams winning in two of those stats, and Michael Carter winning in one. But Javonte Williams is close to or above the average in all three, and Michael Carter is below the average in one, above the average in the other, and right on the average line for the third one. So I can see why people would prefer Javonte Williams, and this apparently became a Javonte Williams video at some point. But I'm really interested in Michael Carter because he's talked about as team small guy. I think he has a decent 3-down skill set. these numbers do not scare me. They actually encourage me. Just across the 3 stats we've just decided to look at by looking at the formulas and results tabs and having broken down his opportunity across multiple other metrics, I can say that's pretty much the overall picture. There are some low notes. I can make some adjustment for the fact that Javonte Williams is on the team, but I think he was incredibly good on the opportunity he got, especially in the situation he was playing at. He's coming from an interesting team the NFL does spend draft capital on in that conference and on that team. I like him. I like him a lot, actually. Alright. So that was kind of fast. Graph. Got something for you. So, wide receiver graphs I've been producing, I was like, I want to have a graph for running backs, and I don't. So, what I did, don't tell anyone, obviously. What I did is I went and found the total number of touches players with at least one top 24 season in the NFL between 2008 and 2020 had in their best season. Now, their best season in adjusted yards per team pass attempt. Remember that stat that we were just looking at that Michael Carter was a little low on, and Devontae Williams was high on, and also tested very well at R squared to points per game in that it was good at predicting who was too many bunny rabbit is, who is going to be good in the NFL. It's the same stat we were looking at before. That's essentially what I'm telling you. And what we can do is plot their touches against that kind of efficiency volume mix of adjusted yards per team attempt. So we're going to see how efficient they were compared to how many touches they were. Now, this is useful for a number of reasons. One of the criticisms I have heard from Jordan McNamara when I was talking to him on his podcast or live stream or something when he was releasing his new book, was that you need volume to be good in yards per team pass attempt or yards per team attempt. And so it's a little uneven. Now, I don't entirely agree with that, but it's an interesting idea that you can't be as high in yards per team attempt, or adjusted yards per team attempt in this case, with lower volume. Like, it's an uneven comparison. So I was like, what if we just do both? Like, you have to have a certain yards per team attempt adjusted based on your touch threshold, and there'd be a nice linear relationship because those two things have a decent linear relationship, and that's what Jordan was pointing to, and we can judge it based on that trend line, and that would be a graph for running backs. And so you can, that's what it is. I made a graph. I'm proud of me. So yeah, that's what this graph is. Essentially what you've got is running down the bottom here. This is the number of touches they got in their best yards per team attempt season. And running up the side, or the y-axis here, the vertical axis, you see their actual yards per team attempt, adjusted for giving extra points to receiving yards, basically. So, and remember, all these blue dots here, these are all the players since 2008 who have at least one top 24 season. So everyone's in there, man. And I highlighted a few names just to get your, so you could get your bearings a little bit. Yeah, here we go. So you got Antonio Gibson with very low touches because he didn't play much of a running back role, but was highly efficient with them because he was actually playing more of a wide receiver role, so he's going to look good in running back efficiency stat, right? Up the top here, you see Aaron Jones, and this, along with everything else on Aaron Jones' profile, is why we really liked him, even as a 4th-round pick versus Jamal Williams' 3rd-round pick. He's incredibly good in adjusted yards per team attempt, with around 250 touches, and you can see that's well above the trend line. He's the highest one above the trend line in this average number of touch range in their best year for this stat. And Christian McCaffrey obviously exists up here at the top as well. So yes, he got a buttload more touches, and therefore a buttload higher yards per team attempt, but he was even better in it than Aaron Jones, and he had 100 more touches, or 50 more touches or so, sorry. So again, you can see how, and remember this is only good players in here, so they're all going to look good to it. And even these blue dots below the line, these were players with at least one top 24 season. Notice I've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire highlighted here. He's slightly below the line, but he's had a top 24 season, so these blue dot players are not bad players. Being below this line doesn't mean, oh, that means they're bad. It just, all these players are good, and it's just a frame of reference to where they fit in. This is Saquon Barkley, for example. He's below Aaron Jones. He's below Christian McCaffrey. He's below Aaron Jones, even within a similar touch threshold. Saquon Barkley's better than Aaron Jones. Even I can probably admit that. But it just gives you a frame of reference in terms of in their best season, how do they stack up to past prospects who've been good in the NFL, right? That's my idea. It was just an off the top of my head thing, so I'm not going to say it's a big deal or nothing, but I wanted a graph, and I think this is a fairly good way of looking at the college production. So, let me add in Michael Carter, and he fits in right here. Again, in his best season, he had fewer touches than, we'd really want. He's not getting this dominant workload that you see Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, even Aaron Jones having. He didn't get over 200 touches. But, comparing him to prospects who've had top 24 seasons, with this kind of threshold of touches, he was highly efficient in adjusted yards per team pass attempt in his best season. And as I wrote in that chapter, that's actually going in Jordan McNamara's new book, the latest edition of the, what is it called? The Analytics of Dynasty, something like that. And I've talked about in these videos before, how it's a good idea to assess running backs through their best season, because of the way opportunity works, as I mentioned earlier, and also they can play behind Saquon Barkley's, hello Miles Sanders, and means that sometimes their average and sometimes their first year or their age adjustments don't quite tell the full story. In fact, I'd say they almost never do, and so best year is often the best path into understanding how good they were in college or their potential for how good they could be in the NFL. And so that's why I'm using the best year in terms of touches and in their best adjusted yards per team attempt year. Michael Carter looks pretty good in here. Again, being above the line doesn't mean, that means he's a fantastic prospect. It just means he's comparing pretty well. If he gets draft capital, goes to a decent situation, everything else fits in with your process, he looks good on tape, my favorite tape grinder likes him, whatever it is, I think this tells a pretty decent story of what I was just trying to describe with his overall stats here. He looks like he fits in pretty well, despite being part of a committee in that North Carolina offense who is fairly efficient. In fact, he was incredibly efficient with the level of touches he was getting with Javonte Williams on the team, and he and Williams were both getting a higher share of the offense for running backs 1s and 2s than most have since Gio left. I like him, especially as a lesser rated player because of, team small guy and team, committee, which doesn't mean he's going to play in a committee because, again, Gio did the exact opposite and became part of a committee in the NFL. Those things don't always translate. I think he's interesting. I think he's very interesting. I have him very highly ranked. And yeah, I'm going to be looking to spend some draft capital on him. That's where I'm at. And this video is really long, so I'm going to quit now. But yeah, I really like Michael Carter. Forgot about that. And that's how I'm looking at his production right now. Again, I've got more questions. I want to go and find out more about why those seasons played out that way. Why did he play less games this year, more games that year? I want to know more about Javonte Williams, who I have not broken down exactly this way like I have with Michael Carter. I want to know what everyone else thinks about him. And finally, we're going to need to know what teams think about him, which is knowing what happens in the draft. But, yeah, I like him a lot, especially in a very weak draft class. There are very few running backs, so I'm very happy to say, yes, I like this player, and yes, I like this player. At running back, this is a rare thing for me to be perfectly happy saying. I have more questions than I have answers with most of these running backs. With Carter, I think I get it. I think there's a lower ceiling there, but I do think that ceiling is there, if you know what I mean. I think he's good enough to reach that ceiling in the NFL. And who knows, sometimes they outproduce what we expect of them. So, I don't know. And there's a flaw there. He's got a decent receiving skill set, not a Giovanni Bernard level receiving skill set, but that's a high bar to cross. And that's not just my Gio love speaking. That guy can catch a ball. Like, he's really good. But anyway, and Michael Carter looks pretty decent in that regard as well, which, again, provides some sort of PPR floor in what I think is a fairly weak class. Now, before I go, I will point out that some of the best players come from the weakest classes, and so I'm not saying there isn't a great player at any position in this class. DeAndre Hopkins comes from one of the weakest classes, along with Keenan Allen, a wide receiver that I've ever seen. And they're two of the biggest hits we've ever had since I've been playing this sport. Or not sport, since I've been playing this nerd game about a sport. Ever. And they came from a very, very weak draft class. Same thing has happened at running back. So just because it's a weak class doesn't mean there are weak hits. Those are two different things. Get that out of here. They could be great players here. I suspect there are at least 3 at each position. Or 1 at each position and 3 hits at each position. So weak class doesn't mean weak hit. Just so I'm being clear on that. And yeah, Michael Carter's got potential. That's my conclusion. Yeah. All right. That's all my Michael Carter and football takes. I'm gonna go to the big screen here and do a goodbye thing. I'm really desperately trying to get these videos shorter. I'm trying to improve. I've reached out to everyone I know who's good at YouTube, and they're like, "What do you want to know?" And I'm like, if I knew that, I wouldn't have questions. I don't know what I need to know. So if you guys could let me know what's going well, what needs to change. I do think I have to get the runtime of these breakdowns closer to 10 minutes somehow. But as you can see, I suck at doing that. But I'm working on it. Yeah. But let me know if I can improve it. If you want to see anything else added. I'm trying to make other videos about other subjects, NFL related, stats related, because I like answering questions with a video response instead of saying, you know, here's my long typed out reply. Oh yeah, here's a simple explanation with a guy wearing a hat. It just seems like a better response to most of the common questions I get, so I'm trying to do that. My video upload speed is slowed. I was doing at least 1 a day. I'm now 1 every other day. Now that's partly because we've had a lot of problems here. Probably don't know, but nor do you need to or need to worry about it. But I've also recently been suffering tooth pain, and it's really painful to talk right now. It's bad enough that my wife's mad at me because she's like, go to the dentist, and I'm like, I don't want to. They do that stuff that I don't like with the drill. I don't want to. And I found that with the right balance of Tylenol and tweeting about football on the internet, you can almost forget. But then talking is actually very painful. So I slowed down a little bit here, trying to find a balanced schedule so I can have a life and keep making videos and doing all my, because I've got to write articles at some point. So essentially what I'm saying here is I've got 337 subscribers here on YouTube so far. Thank you. For a month's worth of grinding, I'm really happy with that. And please let me know what I can do better, what I can do worse. If I need to go back to 1 a days instead of 1 every other days, I can talk more. Don't worry about my teeth. I can talk more. Don't worry about it. Or if is getting it shorter much more important than I think? Because right now it's kind of a joke. I know for the algorithm, 10-minute videos is where it's at. I don't really care about that so much as I don't want you to be going, oh god, hurry up, Pete, I want to move on to my next video. Like, if that's a problem, if it's less consumable, less enjoyable, I'll work harder to shrink the time. If it's a YouTube algorithm thing, then screw them if they can't take a joke, frankly. So, yeah, I don't mind about that so much. I'll try to improve, but if it's better for anyone watching, I'll make more of an effort. I care very little about me or YouTube. But if it's you, yeah, I'll make a bigger push to change. So let me know about stuff like that. What do you want to see? Do you need them shorter? Do you need more background music? What is it? Yeah, I'd appreciate any feedback you got. And again, just thank you to everyone who's checking it out. I really appreciate it. Because this is a lot of fun. I'm surprised how fun this is. So thank you very much. And I'm getting out of here now. Because I just tacked down 5 minutes to a video explaining why they're that I don't need them to be so long, and that seems counterproductive. So, yeah, I probably should go. Appreciate it. Let me know what you think. Talk to you again next time. Bye. I can't find the button.
Do you have the time to listen to me grind? Take down the film.